Hundreds of families in northeastern Kenya are facing the ravages of drought, with reports of livestock dying due to lack of water and pasture. Some children have also dropped out of schools to help their parents search for scarce pasture and water. Hamza Yusuf reports.
27 years old Mohammed Ibrahim is trying to save the life of a buffalo stacked into one of the dried up water ponds in Galmagala, outskirts of Garissa. After hours of struggle with his friend, he recorded a video footage to reach out for help on social media. Few kilometers from Galmagala, a truck driver stopped to offer some help to giraffe at the verge of death.
The drought in this region is so serious, it has really impacted on the lives of the people. Animals are dying. If you go from Garissa to Mandera, you will see carcass of animals all over the road. To our leadership in this region, please forget about who is going to be the president of Kenya in 2022. That is not your concern. Look at the lives of the people who have elected you. Help your electors. Some of our leadership are talking of who is going to be the next president of Kenya. But is that a priority?
We are more like always a reactive community. We are not proactive. This thing is something that has been with us. The rainfall for the last 2 years in Garissa County, and for that matter in Lagdera, has been very short of what is expected. What was expected, and we thank God, but for now the situation is dire.
October, November 20.
This has been the situation in the last 2 months in many parts of northeastern and coastal counties. Nearly 2 million Kenyans in 24 counties, which is half of the country's population, are facing starvation. Areas mostly affected are Galmagala, Liboi, Fafi, Balambala, Ijara, Mandera, Wajir, Marsabit, Isiolo, and Turkana. And by extension, some coastal counties like Kilifi and Kwale are said to be in dire situation. Last month, President Uhuru Kenyatta declared the current situation as national disaster and promised the affected counties comprehensive drought mitigation. But pastoralists from this region are saying they're still waiting both level of government, the county government and national government, to deliver the president's promise.
Tafadhali serikali yetu angalie wananchi vile mnyama hiyo naanza kukusha. Ni mtegemea hapa si shamba, mtegemea hapa ni mnyama. Mnyama hiyo kukusha, watu taanza kukula miskini ya misho. Kwa hivyo mina mombi lango ni kuomba serikali yetu ni county na ni national angalie wananchi vile taabu iko hapa.
And you know, if you go on the ground, people have resorted to selling their goods and ships to access water. They clear it, they finish, they go and start selling their camels. And you know, when you have a Somali selling his camel just to access water, you can see how their situation is. It is so painful. The stories you hear on the ground. My friend, some people have no conscience. You know, you wonder what is wrong. Do they have no feelings? What is happening? People who are supposed to help the community have switched off their phones. You know, you can't access them.
The current situation and the crisis witnessed in the country is said to have been compounded by coronavirus pandemic and previous record of poor rains. Hamza Yusuf, KTN News, Garissa.
Now we want to have this conversation on the drought catastrophe in Kenya, which was declared a national disaster on the 8th September of 2021. Now remember, this is in the first similar declarations Similar declarations have been made in the past. In 2011, for instance, through the Kenyans for Kenyans initiative, $10 million was raised in cash to respond to starvation in Turkana County. Irrigation models were initiated in the county through the Red Cross to cushion the region from the ravages of famine. But even with that, the drought cycle and deaths continue to haunt the northern frontier. We want to dive into this conversation, as I had mentioned, and joining me via Zoom is Ikal Angele, who is an executive director, Friends of Lake Turkana, a not-for-profit socioeconomic and environmental NGO in the Turkana Basin. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us here on Bottomline Africa. Now, straight to it, year in, year out, we keep on having the same conversation. Where are we going wrong? Aren't we learning from our mistakes?
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, as you said it, and as the presenter said it earlier on, it is year in, year out. And one of the things that you can see is it's sort of, it's a cycle. And one of the main thing is that we don't use the early warning system. So we knew that, as you know, the people, the pastoralists themselves said, the last rain cycle was in 2019. And in 2020, when you guessed it, any rain, when it's been a very dry season, then the rain doesn't allow for the pasture to get back to the healthy state. So you're seeing a cycle, but one is policies are being made without taking into account the reality on the ground. As everybody is saying, it's water. So if you listen to the devolution minister, former devolution minister and ourselves, Eugene Wamalwa, he's talking about giving food. But if you see what people are struggling with, is just the protection of their livelihood. So you can feed me, but you see people taking that feed and giving it to the animals, but it's very little. So you see that it's a very reactionary model rather than really thinking through and planning for it. And that, for me, is one of the biggest gaps.
You've talked about the fact that there are policies that keep on being made, but people don't know the situation on the ground. What are the right policies that we need as a country right now?
So one, there's a reality. I mean, climate change is real. And so it's taking into account climate smart policy making, realizing that, yes, it's a dry area, but no one can say that, you know, it's just gotten worse. We used to get drought every 10 years. And so recognizing that it's no longer 10 years, it's 5 to 2 years now that we're getting the drought. So taking that into account and planning for it. And yet the policies that are being made are based on, 25 years ago when we were not experiencing the climate crisis as we are now. And that's one of the things to take into account. There's an increase, urbanization. Turkana, for example, has the largest livestock population. So it's also recognizing that if you get sick when your body, if you're hungry and your body is unwell, then your probability of succumbing to the disease is higher. So it's linking and taking into account that there's certain livestock diseases that are actually affecting the animals now worse when it's a dry season. And so there's a various number of things, but it's really looking at how the policies are made that is not just one sector approach, but looking at the multi-dimensional aspects of the northern frontier. And as indicated, the ourselves in Kenya is half the counties. So 24 counties are arid and semi-arid lands. And that is very critical to really take into account when planning for the country and not planning from a crop production perspective only.
Even as we talk about policies, I beg your pardon, the one problem that we have in Kenya is slow implementation. Is there a way that we could directly go to the residents, for example, of Turkana and train them on how best they can cope with such, cases of drought?
There's a lot of funds that are going into climate mitigation and adaptation, but if you look at it, it doesn't really focus on the northern frontier and the rangelands, pastoralist areas. It really has looked at mostly the mountains, forests, and so it's very critical to look at what does climate adaptation mitigation look like for the rangelands and pastoralist dryland areas. That's one of the things, and that would then bring in linking national, county, and then really village level, because as devolution has given us, it allows for development to happen at the village level. And I think that's what's critical to happen. But we see a lot of it. So, the big four of the president includes food security. If you look at all the counties, they've been talking about food security, but no one is very clear on what are we doing to address that food security. So if and that for me is the biggest gap. We just keep saying food security, but what exactly is being done to address the food security and insecurity situation.
Even as we wait for the government to do what they're supposed to do, talk to us about what Friends of Lake Turkana is actually doing.
So one of the things we've been working on is the policy angle. So recently, Kenya Meat Commission said that they would be off-taking livestock at 20,000 shillings. It is critical for Kenya Meat Commission to understand that no one can sell livestock at 20,000 shillings. So some of the things that we've been doing is working with communities to engage with the county government on budgetary processes, so that even within the budgets, you're able to see what is it that is being allocated to livestock extension services, veterinarial services, protection of the rangeland. So we do a lot of mapping of the rangelands and migratory areas, because if the land and territories that pastoralists have been using is taken up, whether for infrastructure or they're not in a very good state, or the rangelands, then it means that they don't have a pasture. But mostly it's really ensuring that citizens are participating in the development of policies and budgets to ensure that it works for them. Because we can say devolution is working for communities, but if we don't participate, then you see an increase in policies being made for us, but not with us, and it's not really helping us.
So how effective are these projects that are being rolled out by NGOs and the likes when it comes to mitigating climate change and hunger in the area or the region?
I think the biggest problem is a lot of this, climate change has also become a cliche word. And also in Nairobi, and then decide and design projects. And this is what you can see is leading to a gap. So you find irrigation projects set up without real ownership of the communities, and because they are in dire need, the power dynamics, then they take up the project. So we see a lot of this, as you mentioned, the Kenyans, it was a good project. But then if you're in one village and every village member is part of the project and they're producing tomatoes, they cannot sell the tomatoes, well, the most they can do is make tomato soup. And that does not necessarily address the food security. So it's thinking through and asking big questions around how this projects really not only do the short term, but can really lead to some serious sustainability.
All right, even as we wind up this conversation, let's talk about the fact that in the past we did not learn from our mistakes. Here we are, we have a chance to learn from our mistakes, the current situation on the ground. Not that I am hoping for another drought, but it will come if we're being realistic. What should we start doing from now?
I think the biggest one is thinking through the access to the use of water, the recycling of water, rainwater collection of water, really making sure that there's access to water. Because the biggest thing, as was shown in the video before, is that it's access to water that really creates a very dire situation. So it's looking at how do people access water? Can they afford it? Can they access it? Is it good quality? And is it the quantities? Is it enough? If you focus on the water, then the other things start to pile up. And I think that's the very critical part.
All right, thank you very much, Ekal Angele, who is the Executive Director, Friends of Lake Turkana, a not-for-profit socioeconomic and environmental NGO in the Turkana Basin. Of course, just breaking it down for us, what needs to be done to ensure that we manage such disasters better in the future. Well, finally, demonstrators gathered in different cities of Bolivia on Tuesday to celebrate the indigenous Wifala flag and to show support